My name is Justin Haddad, and I'm a permaculture designer. We are inside our permaculture backyard here in Glendale, Arizona. So this property is actually my father's home. He's owned it for about 30 years now, originally built it. This whole place was rock. It wasn't really enjoyable, and there wasn't much fruit growing, just the orange tree and olive tree that we have on the property. And then eventually we got like 1 or 2 fruit trees other than that. We wanted to grow our own food, and the only way to do that was to do it in our backyard because we don't have a large farm space. And so we had to figure out how we're going to grow food in our backyard sustainably and not use so much water, and also not have to spend so much money for fertilizers or different types of synthetics and compost and things like that. Then I came across permaculture, and permaculture showed me a great way to reutilize what's already around you. A lot of products that you can already get for free, and then you can use them in your garden space so that you can efficiently grow plants without having to go and spend extra amounts of money on fertilizers and synthetic nutrients. Another big reason why we got into this was for health reasons. We discovered being on a plant-based diet was more suitable for us, and we realized it would give us a longer lifespan or a more enjoyable lifespan, knowing that we're not harming animals and that we're eating food that we've grown. So we really worked hard into this and put pretty much all of our heart and soul, blood and tears, just to make this all happen. The reason why we really got into growing like tropicals is because we discovered we're in zone 9B, which is considered subtropical, even though we don't get a lot of rainfall where we're at. Some people consider us a desert. We are able to produce, though, these subtropical trees as long as we have the right microclimate set up. So if your yard isn't bare and you're willing to take some time to make it not bare, you can definitely be able to grow a lot of these exotic fruits that we're growing now. Permaculture is a gardening method that we use to imitate what nature already does for us. So if you walk into a forest and you kind of look around, the first things you see is there's a lot of debris on the floor, which we call mulch, a lot of wood chip, leaves, different rotten fruits, different types of animal feces and things like that, all spread across the forest. And now nobody waters the forest and nobody prunes the forest, yet these trees, they all grow very symbiotic, and these ground covers and different shrubs and vines grow all around each other, and it doesn't really require any maintenance. So if you take those same practices and you bring them into a small space like your backyard and you amplify it over time, you can really achieve what the forest has already created if you're willing to take the time to do it. One big thing is we like to mulch a lot. We use a lot of debris. We get it from different arborists around the area. They come and they drop off debris. There's multiple ways to get this for free. When we get the debris, we then spread it across our yard. We typically are getting chopped up trees that were fresh that day, where you can already get composted mulches and already store-bought mulches and things, but we recommend to go fresh and just let it break down over time. It's how you're going to get a more natural product. The whole goal of putting mulch down is not just to create humus, it's also to create insulation for the trees. So it can actually create a cooler climate for the tree's soil conditions during the summertime, where in the wintertime it can actually warm up the soil conditions for the trees. So it really works like an insulation. And on top of that, mulch will also produce mycelium. There's 2 different forms of mycelium, one that forms into the root and one that wraps around the root. Both of them are providing food for a lot of these plants and makes it necessary for them to grow sustainably without any human contact. So that's what permaculture really is. We're really trying to recreate that. And another big factor with permaculture is not being afraid to be multi-diverse with your plants. You want to be able to plant nice tall trees that will provide shade for other trees that want to be understory trees. And at the same time, you want to plant nitrogen fixers, which those trees will provide nitrogen for other trees when they are pruned or picked the fruit off of the tree. The roots inside the soil have nodules and they kind of break, and that allows nitrogen to flow into the soil. And this is typically to feed the tree that it is coming from, or the shrub or the vine. Overall, if there's too much nitrogen and it doesn't need all of it, it'll give it off to the rest of the plants because it'll just sit there in the soil and then it's up for grabs for anyone. Also, a lot of plants like to work together. There are different types of vegetables that are considered companion plants. One that's very common, known as the three sisters, which is squash, corn, and beans. They work really well together. One provides nitrogen, the other one grows tall for the beans to grow on, and then there's squash that grows on the ground and covers and shades it and cools it down and provides a lot of fruit. So, you know, there's a lot of different companion planting. So we plant a lot of different ground covers, shrubs, and vines all around each other in very condensed areas. It's what gives you a very temperate microclimate. You know, you want to make sure that you're not getting too much sun in certain areas so you can grow tropicals, but also you want to be able to allow sun in to grow in some of these plants that do need it. And then as well as you need some areas that are condensed with a lot of humidity for other plants. So you want to be able to create these microclimates. And what microclimates are just basically small groupings of area that are designated for certain types of plants. And that way you can be able to bring in different types of tropicals in areas that are considered desert, like where we live. Where we are right now growing guavas, papayas, mangoes are flowering right now. And we've had friends that have provided plenty of awesome fruit that you don't typically see around here. What permaculture is basically the study of working with nature to garden versus working against nature using synthetics and different types of pesticides and herbicides. So we don't use any kind of herbicides or pesticides. If we do, they're organic sprays that are derived from oils. They're not any weird GMO products that are pushed around like Roundup or things like that. It, you know, provides a more sustainable gardening process, and it will provide you better food in the outcome because you'll have more nutrient dense food. And that's where the health factor came into play when turning this backyard into a food forest. You know, we really wanted to provide ourselves with nutrient dense food, and the only way to do that is organically and through different kinds of processes. Our three main things that we do in this yard is we mulch, we compost, and we use compost tea. Those three things will get you where you want to be anywhere in the world. The biggest misconception is pests. A lot of people think that if you lay down mulch, you will receive things like scorpions and termites. And the truth is, termites don't care about dead mulch. If they do, they're going to consume that before they consume the home. Scorpions typically like to live in the mulch, so it will keep them away from your home. Since we started mulching, actually, we've seen less scorpions inside of our home and less scorpions in general than we ever have before, and it gets less and less every year. So it seems like they prefer living in the mulch rather than trying to find a cool, nice place to live inside your home. So give them a cool, nice place to live outside of your home and you won't have to worry about it. We're in zone 9B, and over here we get really dry weather. People think we can't grow things like guavas or mangoes or avocados or sugarcane or you know, papaya, different things, passion fruit. They don't know about this stuff. A lot of the things that we grow out here currently are citrus. Different types of oranges and grapefruit and lemons. That's typically what's common. The people that have realized we could grow other things, we grow peaches, we grow nectarines, we grow plums and pears and apples. We have a large variety of fruit that we can actually grow out here, and a big misconception is we can't grow these things because it's just too hot and too bare out here. Truth is, you provide enough water, you give them the right microclimate, you could grow just about anything here, and this backyard has been proving that. The food in the grocery store sucks, and the food in the farmer's market's bought from the same wholesaler that the grocery stores are buying it from. So you're just rebuying it without the sticker now. It's just non-nutritional food. It's just water weight that you're putting in your body just to get by. When reality is you can be growing your own food, and we could be trading food amongst each other, and eventually having a large community of people growing their own food using their front and backyards for growing space. It doesn't have to look ugly either. A lot of this stuff is very ornamental, looks beautiful, and it can provide you something. You know, we've shown that in the front yard, we've shown that in the backyard. There's plenty of things you could grow that look great, even in the winter time, even in the beginning of spring where things are still growing. Having to see bare yards just kind of makes me upset, but actually what makes me more upset is seeing yards with large lawns of grass, because grass is pretty much useless and it's a lot of water that's being used, and that could be turned around for vegetable crops or trees or both, or different herbs and different types of medicinal plants could be grown. I recommend every square inch be used for garden space if possible. I think those people need to get in contact with us so we could turn their land into something edible. Even if you just want it to look pretty and you don't want to go over excessive and you want it to look like you're walking into some kind of resort, that can be a thing, and it can still all be edible. There's no reason why it doesn't have to be. You know, to see a lot of these trees that are planted along different company properties or along the cities, you know, a lot of these plants could be edible. Instead, we plant a lot of things that do very little to society in general.
As an independent team of filmmakers, we love producing documentaries for artisans of all trades, honoring skill, passion, and determination. So whether you're a garage baker, homegrown mycologist, backyard farmer, or off-grid homesteader, send us a message and share your story with the world.
We're really demanded to be forced to use a grocery store or a farmer's market that doesn't provide the right produce because they're not growing the produce themselves. I would love to see more land being used and utilized to produce food, because if we were doing that, we could definitely end world hunger. More people were utilizing their yards, or at least having companies utilize their yards to turn their yard into something that's edible. They can enjoy it, and then whatever is too much for them, they can give it off, and it can actually be given out to people that truthfully need food out there. The fact that people still die today over hunger is insane. So if we could change that, that'd be amazing. All land should be utilized in some way to benefit human population. And if it's not being utilized to benefit human population, then it should be. It should be converted, because it's being used for minute ornamental plants out in your front yard, where you can have beautiful lettuce and vegetable beds growing, producing produce for everyone, not just you. The progression from the soil and being able to dig into it and see the different types of worms and different types of mycelium and different nematodes that are growing and producing inside that soil just from laying down mulch. You know, when we plant something new, we just recently planted a loquat tree. That loquat tree didn't even see our native soil because of how much humus is built up. We were able to plant it within the humus, and then it can be layered with mulch, and then after that it will grow into the native soil, which is already really loose and filled with earthworms at this point. So that's really one thing that gets us excited here, or gets me excited here. So you could definitely taste the difference between eating something homegrown versus eating something store-bought. For instance, carrots, they are a lot sweeter when you grow them yourself. When they're from a grocery store, they taste like a carrot, but there's like no sweetness. But when you grow them yourself, it's almost like eating a candy, and you're kind of confused why this carrot tastes so sweet, or this broccoli tastes so sweet. Or when you eat a tomato, it really tastes like a fruit and not a vegetable like you would assume it is, because it is a fruit. You know, it has seeds and it has pulp, and it's all in the interior of it, so it's a fruit. And people don't realize that, and they're supposed to be sweet. They're not supposed to be sour like you taste them at the grocery store. Also, when you have something like a delicious fruit like a mango, for instance, or an orange, when you eat it from a grocery store, it really is just like water weight and sugar. You don't really feel like you're getting any nutrition out of it. You're just kind of like enjoying some sugars and you're moving on. But when you have it from your yard, I mean, when you cut open an orange and you look at it, it's so dense and so juicy compared to a store-bought. And on top of that, the pigmentation is even deeper and more intense or more vivid than your store-bought. And then when you actually go to eat it, the flavor is more complex. You can really taste that orange or that mango, or you know, whatever berries you're growing. You know, we've grown alpine strawberries here, something you can't see in a grocery store. And that's another thing. Some things you can't even get in a grocery store that you could grow at home because of its shelf life. Not everything has a long shelf life, but it's great to enjoy. You can have lots of fruit to eat that don't live that long inside your fridge, but you know, you can eat them while they're fresh, and you can really enjoy them, or freeze them and store them, or freeze dry them, or dehydrate them. Being able to tell the difference from a store-bought fruit and a homegrown fruit is like night and day. I mean, there definitely is a huge difference. You can visibly see it, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it when it's in your system later on. You don't feel like nothing happened. You feel like, hey, I got a little boost of energy, and like that feels great. There's a quote that said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time is today. It's so detrimental that you get your trees and your plants and your design created as fast as possible and starting to plant things as fast as possible. Because if you keep waiting another day to plant a tree, you're gonna have to wait another day to see some fruit. And some of these plants might take anywhere from 3 years to 10 years to produce something for you, especially if you're doing things from seed. Now there are grafted trees that can speed up these processes, but then you're gonna typically have some other issues that can go along with grafted trees, especially if the rootstock is not designed for your soil, which we typically see a lot, for instance, in Arizona with tropical trees. We get a lot of trees from Florida, and they don't really do so well out here in Arizona because of their rootstock, and typically, you know, they weren't born here either, you know. So if you can get the seeds to grow here, they typically do better than if you import plants around from other places. So anywhere you are in the world, I recommend growing from seed. And if you feel like you want to graft onto a branch or two, go for it, but really I recommend letting the seed grow through its thing too, because you might have a better fruit than any of those grafted plants that you try to put onto it. When it comes to generational planting, you want to make sure that you are planting from seed. So you plant let's say you planted a mango from seed and it produced fruit. Now if you took that fruit and you started new batches of trees, those are second generation trees. Those have adapted better to your climate at that point. And you can now use those to start a new batch, and then you find out which one's growing the best, the most vigor, has the best flavor from those trees, and then you're going to take seeds from that one and you're going to start a new batch. And now what this is doing is creating a stronger genetic so that you can have something that's more viable to your area. And not many people think about this anymore because grafted trees are available so easily. If you have the ability of planting from seed, I recommend it. And if you also have the ability, even with your vegetable crops, to reseed your soil with crops that you've started the first year, you'll end up seeing that you'll have multiple crops from that plant that you originally started with. Say you had a celery plant and you enjoyed it, and then it went to flower and it seeded. Well, those seeds can be spread around and they can produce more celery. And now this celery is more hardy to your climate. Same with tomatoes, same with peppers, same with any type of plant in general. You know, the longer it keeps growing in your area, the better it gets. So each seed is really its own genetic, and it's really unique how you can start creating your own byproduct from what you started with seed A, and you end up with seed Z that is completely different after a 20-year span or a 26-year span, you know. So you really want to be able to see what we can do by producing our own seeds, and this way we can have something that's more viable to where we live versus where other people live, because a lot of the stuff we're doing right now all around the world, everything is imported from different places depending on where you are, or at least all around the nation, everything is imported depending on where you are. So, you know, we might get fruits from Mexico if they're tropical, where reality is you should be getting them from where you live, or you might get some vegetables from China, where reality is you should be growing them where you live. So definitely try to produce your own food, and then produce food from the seeds that came from the food that you ate. It's really interesting when you are outside in the open space, like you're out in an outdoor mall, or you're walking around your block, or you're just outside in your front yard. You can feel a lot of intense heat. For instance, I'm going to talk specifically about the summertime, what it feels like, you know, because you have intense heat after 11 a.m. around here, and it gets really unbearable. But then once you walk through our back gate and you kind of walk into it, and you start heading underneath the trellis, it starts feeling 5 to 10 degrees cooler depending on where you are in the yard. And when you start walking through the yard, you just really start feeling like you're in a dome or something, because the trees have surrounded you. There's a lot of shade now everywhere. The ground feels a lot cooler. You can kind of feel being in an understory versus being in open ground on asphalt, where the temperatures can be, you know, extremely high compared to the actual temperature outside, and to the point where dogs have to wear shoes around where we walk. It feels amazing when you're back here, especially in the summertime when it's feeling really cool, or when we have these nice high breezes and you can feel all the trees kind of giving you their oxygen during that time. That's another thing. You can definitely breathe better when you're back here than when you're out in the city. You know, there's a lot more oxygen being produced. It feels great when you're walking around. Some of these trees are actually known to produce high amounts of oxygen. So when you're around them, you're feeling better. You have more endorphins flowing through you. And then on top of that, it's cooler in the summer. Even in the winter, it is significantly warmer here than it is if you were out in the open. Because out in the open, there's nothing protecting you. Here we have a lot of windbreak, we have a lot of mulch, which produces a lot of heat in the wintertime, and then we keep moisture in the ground all year round, and that allows the ground to stay warmer, because water will actually freeze at a lower temperature than air does. So air typically gets colder faster than water, so we typically like to keep our ground cool, our plants moist, especially in the wintertime. If you don't know where your food is coming from, you can be easily eating different harmful pesticides or insecticides or herbicides. You can also be eating different types of foliar feeds that you're unaware of. So a lot of people use synthetic fertilizers and they spray them on the leaves or on the fruits and vegetables to get them more plump, larger, bigger, faster, and then you're going to end up eating that later. And if you know, some of these things have soft skin, and a lot of that stuff soaks into the skin. You know, they say some of them that have thicker skins, like bananas or avocados, you might not have to deal with some of this stuff. But even in the end, you know, there's still that risk that you're putting on your body. And not eating the most nutrient dense or the most healthiest thing for you is going to only inflict you in the end and make you deal with some pains and struggles later when you get older. The whole point of living life is so that when you're older, you don't have to live in such pain. More people today live in pain due to the medications that they're on, and they're not focused on what foods they're putting in their body. So making sure you know where your food is sourced, like trying to get food that isn't sourced from out of your country is very important, but also if you're eating food that's locally grown, you're going to get nutrients that are only produced within your region. And you're also going to get different types of pollen that are going to be attached to some of these plants that are only produced in your region, which are going to help with you fighting different types of flus or colds during the seasons, or different types of sicknesses that you could be getting. Another great part about growing food on your own and knowing where it's coming from is that you're growing within the season. So a lot of times you go into a grocery store and you find apples all year round. Apples don't grow all year round. You typically find them around July and August, and then apples are gone. And if you didn't preserve them properly, you won't have any more apples for the rest of the year. People don't really realize that. Having to grow your own food really teaches you what's in season, and what's in season is going to be more beneficial for you. Like when you have oranges on your tree, you need to consume those oranges because you're going to get vitamin C, because you need vitamin C because it's around the winter time, and that's when flu season picks up. And there's a lot of things like that, a lot of different greens that grow in only certain times of the year, and they're important for that time of the year. So you want to make sure you kind of get this luxury of knowing exactly where your food was coming from, how it's grown, and whether or not it's in season. Because if you can't grow it outdoors, then it's not in season. And so, or if it's not fruiting or flowering for you yet for you to consume it, then it's not in season. So you want to make sure what you're growing is in season, what you're consuming is in season. Don't eat watermelons in December because watermelons only come in the summertime. But right now I could go to the grocery store and I could buy a watermelon, a cantaloupe, and you know, plenty of tomatoes, which unless you're growing them in a hothouse, which is what they're doing, you're not going to have tomatoes right now. You won't have tomatoes till the summer, or cucumbers even. And this is just something we typically see. We're really used to eating what we see in a grocery store and not realizing what it has to do to stay on those shelves for that long. You know, a lot of things are put into different types of rooms, sprayed with different chemicals, or given put in oxygen chambers to stay fresh longer. That's fine for some people to eat, but that's not something that I would prefer putting in my body, and I don't recommend anybody putting in their body. So if you could grow your own food, you have even the slightest, smallest amount of space, even a balcony space, you can grow something, you can consume something and better benefit yourself from consuming really harmful sprays like insecticides, herbicides, and pesticides, or any harmful fertilizers that you may be consuming. And you know, you can try to wash this stuff off, but if it's in the skin, you're not really going to get it out. Everyone should be growing their own food. I mean, there should be no reason why somebody doesn't grow their own food. Whether or not you have a balcony space or you have acreage of land, you can grow your own food. And you can even probably work something out. If you say you even live in a small apartment complex, you could probably work something out. If you get enough signatures, you can probably start some kind of community garden within the apartment complex. You know, there's so many different ways. There's community gardens out there. There's different possibilities for people to grow their own food. It's just a matter of if you're willing to put in the time. If you're not willing to put in the time and you have the resources to fund a garden and you have the land, there's companies out there that will be willing to take your land and turn it into edible landscape and then provide you with the food you need, and then they will provide the rest of the food to either a farmer's market where they will sell it, or they'll give it to people in need, like food banks and things like that. So everyone really should be growing their own food. There should be no reason why they don't. And if they need help, there's plenty of resource out there. We provide resource, and there's plenty of other people as well that provide resource. What brings me joy is being able to provide food for other people, not just myself. Really seeing the smile on other people's face when they take a bite of something that just grew from my yard or grew from their yard, it's very exciting, especially what it does to small families or what it does to people that are just enthusiasts about growing fruit or plants. But for me, it really is just growing food for not just myself, but for everyone around me. I would definitely consider permaculture gardening. It is a simple practice for gardening. It's a way to make gardening more efficient for the long run, which a lot of people don't typically assume for gardening, because right now most horticulture outlooks on growing food are used with lots of synthetic fertilizers and tilling and things like that. Like here we don't till. Everything is just in the ground. You want to plant something, you move the mulch away, you plant it in the dirt and you let it grow, and you kind of walk away most of the time. This is a very low maintenance way to grow your own food, and I like to call it gardening because it's fun. It's not a stressful process. You don't feel like you're putting in a whole lot of energy. You might feel like you're putting in a lot of energy in the beginning because you're laying down a lot of mulch. But after you get the trees established, you get the mulch in the ground, you start laying down less mulch yearly. You start having to worry about less plants yearly that are going in the ground and where they're positioned. And then after a while, you just start kind of planting things that just sound fun or sound like they could produce something good for you to enjoy to eat, or something that's medicinal, or something that benefits things around you like the bees or the butterflies or the hummingbirds. We've had phases in this garden alone, and I would definitely call it a garden or even a food forest. That's another term we like to give it. And when you're creating a forest, I would definitely say this is gardening. I wouldn't consider it engineering or agriculture by any means. We're really just turning something that wasn't lush and turning it into something lush and green. I would call this gardening, but most people would probably look at it as landscaping. In my opinion, a food forest is more extreme. You know, edible landscape is something that can look very pretty. Even a food forest can look pretty, but edible landscaping is like very mapped out. You have rows, you have things kind of aligned and symmetrical and lining up with other things. This is something that typically people want when they want it to look very aesthetically pleasing, and they're not really there for the produce that's coming off of it. And it works just fine. You know, we can definitely use permaculture practice doing the same processes, but we're just going to keep it more neat and in lines and organized and designed in a very unique way for the client. When building a food forest, we're really trying to be kind of like in a jungle. So we're planting very close, very compact. We're using up a lot of resource to make that happen. You know, we want to use a lot of mulch. We're not going to get composted mulch. We're going to get raw mulch. We're going to lay that in. We're going to let it build up over time. We want mycelium to be created in a large scale. We want to have a lot of intermittent planting going on. We want it to feel like you're walking literally through a forest. Trees are touching you, you know, vines are touching your hair as you walk by. You have trees you could climb, trees you can sit behind, fruit to pick, fruit to, you know, things to grab from the ground. A lot of times we have like sweet potato and stuff growing as a ground cover. And then it's fun to harvest it because you're pulling it right out of the dirt that you didn't work on, you know, it was just there, and you have sweet potatoes now. Having a food forest versus a edible landscape It's just really comes down to one's more aesthetically pleasing in my opinion, one's kind of more organized, more official, kind of lined up, where the other one's more set up like a jungle, like what you see here. I mean, there's definitely pathways, there's ways to get around, there's things going on, but you might run into a branch, you know? You might have a vine touch your hair, and that's okay. And that's what we want to promote. We want to be able to promote that you feel like you're back in nature. The cool part is we could do this in your backyard, and you don't have to go, you know, a couple hours away to go visit nature. You just have to walk out into your backyard and enjoy it. Having different things like water features like ponds, and then having the trees and everything built around the water feature, and having a built ecosystem and creating it more, like I said, like a forest versus an edible landscape. You can really create those dynamics that make you feel like you're in a new location. Where a edible landscape, you know, you can either be taking a design that's already there and popping things out of the ground that are unimportant and putting things that are important, and or you know, adding mulch and doing things that are necessary to make it a permaculture setup. But then, one, people don't realize you can eat flowers, you can eat leaves. Like for instance, people eat broccoli, right? They eat a head of broccoli. Well, broccoli is an unripened flower. I mean, eventually it flowers, a bunch of yellow flowers come out. So that's an unripened flower. But then on top of that, you can eat the broccoli leaves that are growing on the plant. And or like you can use leaves to harvest to make different types of spices. Like we have curry leaf on the property, and you know that curry leaf can be dried and used, or you could use it fresh in culinary cooking. It gives a really bold flavor, really unique flavor that's enjoyable, especially in East Indian cuisine. And then we also have things like bay leaf, like laurel bay leaf. This is one you wouldn't eat the leaf, but you would use it like in a stew or in a soup or something that where it's going to cook for a long time, and then you take the bay leaf out. Then we have things like hibiscus, where you can eat the leaves and they're really tasty. You know, some taste like cranberry. There's other hibiscus we used to have. We just recently cut it out because the dogs knocked it over. It's called kiku tree, and it's an edible, it's also known as a salad tree, because you eat the leaves and they're nice and broad, and each piece is like a giant nice leaf of salad, and it's very succulent, very tasty, and actually nutritional. And we have things like moringa leaves, which are probably your most nutrient dense leaf that you can eat. It's the most nutrient dense tree in the world, and the leaves are extremely nutrient dense, and it's known as a superfood. And you know, something like this, you go to the grocery store, you could find dried moringa powder at like 16 ounces for upwards of like $20, when reality is we could plant these trees and have unlimited supply of leaves available, and it doesn't require much water, and it loves the sun. Yeah, but you know, a lot of people are surprised. Other than like lettuce leaves, people don't think you can eat anything else. You know, when nurturing plants, it's definitely something where you can get really hurt if that plant dies. You know, especially when you worked really hard on these things. When they're young, you have to really take care of them, and it is similar to taking care of like a child or taking care of an animal, because you have to make sure they're getting their water, their food, they're not getting burnt by the sun. You know, you have to kind of watch them to make sure predators aren't after them while they're young. You know, these are things that you actually have to deal with the younger plants. And then, you know, as they start growing older, they start taking care of themselves. You know, you have a 30-year-old orange tree, you don't worry about it too much. You prune it every now and then, give it a haircut, and it's great. But when you have, you know, a young sapling of an orange tree, you're gonna have to really baby it. It could get burnt by the sun, it could get eaten by rabbits or pests or whatever. There's all sorts of diseases that could come and try to infect it while it's young. You know, these things typically happen towards younger plants. So I wouldn't necessarily consider them something similar to a pet, or, you know, because when a pet dies, it's very, very sad and emotional, and there's different ties that go beyond that. But it does hurt. I mean, it hurts when you lose a plant, especially if it either cost you a lot of money or it cost you a lot of time. You know, I invested probably $200 in plants that were only this big. When they died on me, I felt like I was losing my mind, because I just lost, you know, $200 off of something that was only this big, where like you could get a full-size tree for that price. Sometimes it hurts, especially when money's involved into these options. You know, we have like a soursop tree out there. It's 25 gallon. It's huge. Doesn't have much leaves on it right now, and it's supposed to be full of leaves. If that tree died on me, I'd probably cry. I'd probably get close to it at least, because I've grown that seed for about 6 years or 5 years. and it's gone through a lot, and I've kept it really healthy, and this is the first time I've ever seen it with this little of leaves on it. But we're trying to stress it out. We're willing to take those chances sometimes, and that's something you probably wouldn't do with an animal. You probably wouldn't be willing to stress them out or put them in a condition that's very harmful to them. You're gonna always pamper your animals or your children, you know. We push plants to a different limit than we do other living beings. You know, it hurts to lose them, but I wouldn't consider it like an animal. When growing fruit trees, it can be really rewarding. You know, some don't take as long. We have like papaya that, you know, we get fruit within 1 year and we start harvesting, and that's exciting, you know, that's really exciting. But then when we have things like a mango that we grew from seed and it's flowering for us and it's holding its flowers and it has a lot of fruit production that it wants to produce, if we can even just get one fruit off of those hundreds of fruit that might sit on it, just one fruit, you know, it brings us so much joy to be able to taste that sweetness and to taste, you know, our hard work. And that's really what you're tasting. You're tasting a lot of hard work and a lot of effort when you're able to take a bite into something that you produced on your own, that either took extremely long to produce, or it could have been difficult to grow, or even growing something as simple as a 30-day radish or a 90-day carrot. You know, something like that is just as enjoyable as growing something for 7 years and seeing some fruit get produced off of it. It's just exciting when you nurture these plants and get to be able to harvest something and taste your reward. A lot of things you do in life, you don't get to see a result. This is one thing where you do get to see a result, and it's something you can actually taste and get some kind of benefit from, you know. A lot of times you might work out at a gym, you get pumped, it looks great, but you can't taste your muscles, you know, you can't enjoy it like that. This is one of those things that you can actually taste and get a glimpse of something that is beyond human creation. You know, this is something that was created before us, and then we're getting to reap the benefit off of it.
Hire us to tell your story. As an independent team of filmmakers, we love producing documentaries for artisans of all trades, honoring skill, passion, and determination.
The fruits of our labor literally creates happiness.
Founded in 2020, we harness our collective experience and enthusiasm for storytelling to deliver content that resonates with viewers on every level.
Think big and think outside of the box.
We avoid the constant noise of clickbait news and outrage headlines, instead crafting more intimate narratives that touch on the purpose of life itself. Stories that not only inform but also inspire, whether it's the art of agriculture, the science of fermentation, an innovative garage startup, or the intricacies of off-grid living. We're here to explore it all and invite you to join us in the discovery.
You're just working with what you have at hand instead of having unrealistic expectations.
We know the world is brimming with hidden stories waiting to be told. These are tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
The biggest thing is to realize that there's nothing that you can't do.
Embodying the American spirit that with hard work, dreams really can come true. So whether you're a garage baker, homegrown mycologist, backyard farmer, or off-grid homesteader, send us a message and share your story with the world.